My earliest memory is of the blizzard of '77 in Buffalo, New York during the last few days of January in 1977. An event so impactful, they even made a board game out of it, which I saw still in its shrink wrap at my uncle's house when I went there for a visit 10 years later. And we ripped it out of the packaging and played it. But anyways, there was so much snow in that blizzard that I'm pretty sure at least one of my parents got snowed in at work for days. Those winters were always long and horrible up there in upstate New York, where I come from. And well, I know my dad was, pretty tired of having to get up real early in the morning just to shovel the driveway clear so he could leave for work while the engine was warming up. Anyways, the following year, in 1978, we went on a family vacation where we drove down to Florida in our typical 70s van, and we hit all of the theme parks and campgrounds and the beaches. My dad got this Florida magnet, palm tree, tennis racket, golf club, a coconut, and he put it right on the metal frame right above the driver's side window inside the van. Kind of like symbolic for our trip through Florida. In fact, my parents loved the weather so much, they got all their stuff in order, and the next year we moved down here. So I came here in 1979, and I've been stuck in this town for 40 years so far. Anyways, it's nice. 100 degrees every day. But anyways, during that trip in '78, since we were going to the beach for the first time, we had to get our first beach towels. And there were 3 to choose from. The one I wanted was Superman, because the movie had just come out, and you know what, though? Everyone else wanted that towel too, because it was the only one out of stock. But the other 2 that were there, I'm sure were because they each had their own brand new live-action television series on at the time. And my brother got this one for the Incredible Hulk. Let's take a look at it. Woo! And I got this one for the Amazing Spider-Man. Upside down. All right, here we go. Take a look. Now, we would go on to use these towels to dry ourselves off with after our showers pretty much every day for the next decade until they kind of just fell apart as threads. And it would take me another 20 years to track down these 2 replacement towels. And in all that time, I could only find, just recently in the last few years, reference to the existence of these towels on the internet by one person who mentioned that he had an old Spider-Man towel that he grew up with Stegron on it. Stegron is this yellow monster character. Now see, my whole life I read Spider-Man comic books, and I had no idea who this character was. I couldn't figure it out. I knew all of Spider-Man's villains. He had a ton of famous villains. In fact, I drew a picture of Spider-Man and all of his famous villains here in October 21st of 1990, and we can see Spider-Man here, and we've got the Lizard, Mysterio, Hydro-Man, Kraven the Hunter, the Green Goblin, the Hobgoblin, Dr. Octopus, Sandman, the Rhino, Electro, Scorpion, the Vulture, and Venom. No Stegron. I had never heard of Stegron. I went my whole childhood not knowing who that creature was. And when I found that reference on the internet, Stegron, I said, that's got to be the towel. That's who that character was, Stegron. Let me look this up. Who is Stegron? Well, I had never heard of him because at that time, Spider-Man had been around for 16 years, 1962 to 1978, and during that time, Stegron had only appeared in 4 comic books, starting in 1974 with this issue of Spider-Man. This is a Marvel Team-Up comic. Marvel Team-Up is where Spider-Man teams up with different characters from the Marvel Universe each issue. And in this issue, he teams up with Kazar of the Savage Land. And there's Stegron in his first appearance, written by Len Wein. He's a knockoff of the Lizard character. In fact, he's friends with the Lizard's alter ego, Dr. Curt Connors, and his name is Dr. Vincent Stegron. Now, Dr. Curt Connors used some kind of a DNA, like a lizard DNA injection to regrow his amputated arm. Well, Dr. Vincent Stegron did the same experiment, but with the DNA from a Stegosaurus from Kazar's Savage Land, and became a Stegosaur man. Boy, what a coincidence. Vincent Stegron becomes a Stegosaur. What are the odds? And of course, just like his pal the Lizard, Stegron spoke with a lisp. You know, just like any self-respecting reptile man would. And how the Lizard had a mental command over all reptiles, Stegron had a mental command over all dinosaurs. Ah, the coming of Stegron, the dinosaur man. Hey, Charles Atlas, look at that. Hey, you want to buy some 8-tracks? Oh, here's something. An advertisement for a character. They just show his head, and they say, we're sorry, we can't show you any more or tell you his name. This is a new character coming. Iron Fist. Now, in the next issue of Marvel Team Up, Spider-Man teams up with the Black Panther to battle Stegron. We've got Stegron riding on the back of a dinosaur, commanding an entire army of them as they go to battle Spider-Man and the Black Panther in the middle of New York City. Oh, and here it is. The very first advertisement. This is power. This is Iron Fist. Coming in February in Marvel Premiere. The very first advertisement of Iron Fist. Check this out. Bam! I have that issue. First appearance of Iron Fist. A month? Look at that. Well, they were wrong. They said coming in February, but it's cover dated May. Well, you know what? They always cover dated these things a few months ahead of time as a ploy to keep them on store shelves. Well, back then it would have been spinner racks for longer because you could have it sitting there for months and it didn't look like an old issue yet. Well, I got it signed to Kevin from, I can't read that, Roy Thomas? Oh, geez, I can't remember his name. I'll have to look it up. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. But, woo! But back to the comic at hand. In the end, Spider-Man beats up Stegron, and Stegron ends up drowning. That was it. That's it for Stegron. Goodbye. That was until 3 years later, when that same writer, Len Wein, brought Stegron back in the pages of The Amazing Spider-Man here in 1977. And turns out Stegron survived the drowning. Something about suspending his own, going into suspended animation by force of will or something, and surviving a drowning, floating to shore. And you know what? Now he's got a ray gun that brings dinosaur skeletons to life. It animates the skeletons around. Even though there's no tendons connecting the bones to muscles that could move them. I guess it's all magic that comes out of a ray gun invented by a guy who has stegosaur DNA. I guess that gives you the intelligence to invent magic ray guns. That just happens to coincide with your dinosaur powers. Come on. Comic books. Look at me with my ray gun, zapping the skeletons to life. I'm Stegron. Oh, the Hulk wants a Hostess fruit pie. It's a shocker. And who do we have here? Dr. Curt Connors becomes the Lizard in the end. Apparently he had been cured of being the Lizard. He went back to being good guy Dr. Curt Connors. But now he's the Lizard again. What's going to happen? The Lizard and his knockoff buddy Stegron? Well, they come back for one more issue. Ba-ba-da-ba! Here we are, The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 166. The Lizard and Stegron team up to battle Spider-Man. The War of the Reptile Men. And Spidey is caught in the middle. What do we have here? The first page, the splash page. It's the Stegron art from the towel! Let's look at the towel. Yeah, so here we are. Good old Stegron on the towel. Stegron in the comic. He's been recolored. Interesting. And, Spider-Man's different. So this Spider-Man here in front of Stegron, this is actually a very classic, very widely used piece of promotional artwork that was created by John Romita Sr. That is the artist that took over from the original Spider-Man artist, Steve Ditko. John Romita Sr., he took over drawing all the Spider-Man comics, and he created that image of Spider-Man. It was used on lots of merchandise, including the towel. So they just paired them up. What happens in this issue? First of all, we have a very classic 1970s vibe here with an ad for iron-on transfers for your shirts. Boy, we all had iron-on transfers on our shirts. And here's the best one, a giant mug of beer. Exactly what should be advertised in a child's comic book. Well, they out-70s themselves with this ad. Make money customizing vans by learning how to airbrush on the side of a van. Every van in the 70s had an airbrushed tiger or some kind of Frank Frazetta painting or a wizard. Oh, okay, look at that. Stegron, from one issue to the next, improved his magical ray gun because now when he shoots the dinosaur skeletons, they grow flesh and blood, muscles and skin, and become real-life dinosaurs out of thin air. And, of course, he also controls them. That's quite a gun you got there, Stegron. Oh, look at this. On the inside back cover, we have an advertisement for all of these, gag gifts that you could get. Joy buzzers, rubber chickens, exploding gum, pepper gum, ink gum, x-ray specs. Well, in 1986, I was playing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles role-playing game, and my character, Steel Grip Clucky, had a bag full of these gags, and I went through every comic book I had, and then every friend I had. I went through all their comics, and I would look at every single page of advertisements for these gags, and anytime I saw a new one, I would write it down. And I had this gigantic list of hundreds and hundreds of these things that I kept in Steel Grip's bag. And now I have a whole book about those gags. they show all of the ads and then all of the actual prizes or what have you that you would get if you ordered them, and what they looked like when they arrived. Superman's kryptonite rock. And I got stuff falling out. You know what's cool? The cover glows in the dark. But they've got the X-ray specs. They've got everything in here. So cool. You know what? I got to get back to the story. Well, was there any surprise? Good old Spider-Man, all by his lonesome, beats up the Lizard and Stegron and the entire army of dinosaurs. Single-handedly. Goes out and gets a Christmas tree and brings it home. And cracking through the ice, Stegron drowns again. That was it. We never saw Stegron again. But I did find out that Stegron had 3 appearances in this British comic book called Super Spider-Man and Captain Britain. Well, it turns out these are just oversized, magazine-sized black and white reprints. And they reprint this final 2-part story of Stegron across 3 issues. That took 3 issues because they had to make room for Captain Britain stories. And wouldn't you know it, there's 1 page they left out. They decided in reprinting this story that they would take 1 page and just leave it out of the story and redraw it with new text. And what was that page? This one. The one from the towel. Of all the pages, that was Stegron's only claim to fame. Yeah, why not remove it? Well, that was it. A Lizard knockoff that fought Spider-Man twice over 4 comic books in Spider-Man's entire 16-year history, and then immortalized on merchandise forever. And it would be another 16 years until writer Danny Fingeroth came out with this 4-issue miniseries called The Lethal Foes of Spider-Man, where a bunch of Spidey's villains teamed up to battle him, and they brought back Stegron, who had, in the comics, says he's been missing for years. Turns out he had become a homeless man and amnesiac, lost his memory, and he got hit with a nuclear blast from another ray gun, and it turned him back into a dinosaur man. Well, it's pretty cool to see him back, and in fact, they brought another little-known Spider-Man villain back in these 4 issues. Somebody who only had a couple of appearances in the comic books, but had an entire episode devoted to him of the early 80s cartoon series, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, a villain called Swarm. And that only stands out to me because later on in that decade, I would meet my friend Sean, and we would both do an impression of Swarm. So I guess everyone had seen that episode, including Danny Fingeroth, who brought him back in this miniseries. But that was it for a little while. Now that Stegron was back, he would make appearances from time to time in these 26 years since his return. So Stegron is back. No more towels for him, though. But they did make a Stegron action figure a few years ago. No, I don't have it. But now I want to reveal some secrets about Spider-Man. The first comic book character to have the name Spider-Man was from a 1947 issue of Whiz Comics, where he was a bad guy that battled Shazam, back when Shazam was still called Captain Marvel. Then in 1954, the Ben Cooper Company made this Spider-Man Halloween costume. Now, in 1962, Stan Lee created the classic Spider-Man character that we all know, but he gave the assignment to his main artist, Jack Kirby, to design the character. Well, Stan didn't like Jack's design, so he gave the assignment to Steve Ditko, who redesigned him and then illustrated, I think, the first 100 issues of the comic book while Stan wrote it. And then the following year, in 1963, Ben Cooper came out with the very first officially licensed Marvel Comics merchandise with this Halloween costume design. Then in 1966, John Romita Sr. took over for Steve Ditko on the Spider-Man comic books, and here's the look he gave him. And in 1973, Spider-Man was the villain of a Turkish film called Three Dev Adam, or Three Mighty Men. And in 1984, a young comic fan named Randy Schuler sent in a request that Spider-Man's costume be redesigned black. And his idea was bought, and the design was implemented by artist Rick Leonardi. And in 1988, superstar artist Todd McFarlane returned Spider-Man to his classic look. But we're not done, because in 2007, Australian filmmaker David Ashby became Italian Spider-Man in a viral hit video on YouTube. Now, I spent 6 weeks in Italy back in the summer of 1988, and I got an Italian Spider-Man comic book, where he was called L'Uomo Ragno. L'Uomo Ragno contiene inoltre il primo sconto con Goblin, il primo album Marvel in Italia. Oh, it's a reprint of Spider-Man's first appearance. And my mom just recently went back to Italy a few months ago and got me a new Italian Spider-Man comic. Let's take a look. Aw, they just call him Spider-Man. What happened to L'Uomo Ragno? Hey, super regalo. In regalo un fantastico gadget. Oh, this must be the gadget. It's a Spider-Man car with little Spider-Man pellets. Wheels. Ah, you put the pellets inside. What happens? Step forward. How does this work? Are there instructions? Nope. Like I was going to be able to read it. It'd be in Italian. Why can I not figure out the Spider-Man toy? I can't figure it out. Well, Spider-Man is still in New York. He's here with the Avengers. Everyone speaks Italian in New York? That's, It would be cool if Spider-Man was in Italy. It would be cool if I could figure out this toy! Alright, that's the story of Stegron, the dinosaur man. The mystery monster. The elusive secret character. Star of beach towels everywhere! Puppet time. Do-do-do-do-do. My name's Kevin, and I'm still a child. And my name is Stegron. Would you like me to dry you off for old times' sake? What? No, get out of here. Stegron, you're back. Spider-Man, no! Where you going? Happy Halloween!
Spider-Man, where are you coming from, Spider-Man? Nobody knows who